All right. Technical difficulties out of the way. We're going to get started this morning. And let me just, for folks who are watching the video, just a reminder that this is the Columbus Energy Review Committee. And we were asked by Mayor Coleman, who's joining us this morning, as well as Council President Ginther, to take a look at whether or not aggregation was something that the city should consider. Aggregation, very simply, is using Columbus's buying power by joining together all the citizens and doing a single purchase of electricity or natural gas, and hopefully getting an energy package by doing that that's better for the residents in terms of cost and perhaps some added benefits. We have gone through a number of presentations to learn more about that. And today we're going to be looking at a draft of the final report that we hope to present to the mayor and to Council President Ginther within the next week or so. Just a quick word about process. What we will do today is hear a little bit from the mayor first, but then take a look at the draft and go through it, see how committee members are feeling about it, and then make final changes, get that back out to the committee for a final review, and then we will finish it up. Let me just introduce the committee members who are here today with us, and I'm going to start over on my left with Cheryl Roberto, who is Associate Vice President of the Environmental Defense Fund and a former member of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. Cindy Farson, who is Director of the Central Ohio Area Agency on Aging. Aparna Dayal, who is Director of Energy Services and Sustainability at The Ohio State University and also Chair of the Mayor's Green Team. My name is Mark Shanahan, and I have a small company called New Morning Energy. And then we have Jim Sweeney, who is Executive Director of the Franklinton Development Authority. There are a couple of members who were not able to join us or have not been able to join us yet. Regina Clemens, Director of Emergency Assistance for Impact Community Action Agency, and Pastor Tyrone Laws of the New Hope Baptist Church. And with that, I would like to welcome Mayor Coleman to our meeting and ask him to share any thoughts with us that he chooses to.
Well, first I want to thank all of you for engaging in this important endeavor. Energy, how we pay for it, what it costs is a critical issue in our country and in our city. And I certainly would like to have had more people at this meeting, but I know you're doing everything you can to outreach to the public, to let them know and to educate the public what aggregation is, what it isn't. It was foreign to me as well. And I have a number of questions still on various aspects of it and the point of view of this committee along the way. I'm grateful for what you're doing here. This will have a tremendous impact in the city, no matter what your recommendation is, and then ultimately, no matter what we bring to the public, and whether or not we bring anything to the public for their vote. If we do, this will require a vote, is my understanding. And it'll have, there'll be a consequence, an impact, but we need to understand what that is, what it could potentially be, and how it impacts our city, our residents, our way of life, our quality of life, and the expense of our life. So once again, thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you, ultimately hearing your recommendations, and today I have a couple of questions I'll raise along the way.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. Thank you very much, sir. And we will try to answer them as we hear them. I thought it would be easiest if we just took a walk through the draft that you have before you, and as we go through it by section, Please feel free to raise any suggestions, questions, clarifications that you have as we try to finalize this. I think we're pretty safe on the background section. It really just lays out the charge that was given to us by the mayor and Council President Ginther to explore the issue and come up with a recommendation about whether or not it was something that offered sufficient potential benefit to the citizens of Columbus to move forward into the more detailed exploration that requires. I believe I get everybody's name right in the next section listing the members. I then tried to give a brief overview in the draft of what we did to try to gather information. I think it's very important to stress to everybody that all of our meetings were videoed and are available through CTV3 on a regular basis. I think it was tremendous that city staff were able to set up a website, columbus.gov, Columbus Energy Review, where all the materials we've seen are posted for the public to look at. And questions that were asked during the process from audience members are all going to be posted there with the answers. So even if you weren't at a meeting or if we weren't able to answer a specific question, we're going to be able to get that information out to you. The final report will have appendices that include much of the material that we saw, as well as a disc containing all of the hearings and meetings on video for people to review. So do you think there's anything in this summary of process that I've missed that we need to flag, or anything in that section that we should touch upon? Okay, we're going good so far. On to page 3.
Mayor, microphone closer to you.
Sure. The next section tries to describe in relatively straightforward terms what aggregation is and the process through which, if the mayor and council decided to move forward, what that process would look like. As the mayor pointed out, there is a significant process involved. If the city moves forward, they do have to pass a resolution in city council to do that. They have to choose between what are called opt-in and opt-out programs. In either case, there have to be public hearings. And then at some point, the city has to file its plan with the Public Utilities Commission. On the opt-out provision, the law requires that it go to the ballot. And people in the city, all voters in the city of Columbus, would be able to vote on language created by city council about whether or not to move forward with aggregation. If that's a positive vote, then the first step in getting the plan out there, developed, and is selecting someone who will serve as the aggregation agent for the city. Their first job is going to be to reach out to every eligible customer in the city and make sure they understand what the program looks like, and that they have the option to say, I don't want to participate. And I think the law gives them up to 21 days to make that decision. After that point, we have a firm number and we move forward. We've mentioned a couple of times in the report that it is critical to understand that certain groups of Columbus residents are excluded by state law from being included in an aggregation. And it's not specifically Columbus, it's any municipal aggregation. But folks who are already customers of the municipal electric company are excluded. People who have entered into a contract on their own through customer choice and are not receiving their power from AEP Ohio, but have decided to purchase generation from somewhere else, they too are excluded. And finally, folks who are enrolled in the program that's called PIP, Percentage of Income Payment Plan, because essentially they're already aggregated as a group to purchase electricity for them under a program set up through the state to allow them to make a payment based on their income. So that really targets a portion of the low-income community, residential customers in Columbus. And this would apply to both commercial and residential customers. We haven't done the detailed data analysis, but as stated in here, we believe that a little more than 200,000 residential customers, residential and commercial, would be eligible for an aggregation program in electricity, and about 120,000 would be eligible for aggregation in natural gas. Much of the difference between the two is the PIP program, but it also has a lot to do with how many people have already chosen a different provider and under contract. Is there anything in there that raises questions or?
Just some general questions. First, can you help me understand the pros and cons of aggregation generally?
Sure, I'll take a crack at it and others can jump in as they see fit, and I welcome you to do that. Mayor, I think the underlying argument is that by creating a larger purchaser, by putting together everyone's individual demand for electricity, you're a bigger customer in the market, and that gives you some market-based power to negotiate for a better price. We talked to a number of other cities who've done aggregation, and what each of them told us is that they did look principally at lowering the cost, but they've also started to consider and in some cases implement other elements of an energy plan in addition to lower cost that can include green energy, it can include an emphasis on local economic development and local economic impact of the choice. It can include energy efficiency programs. So we start with cost and then we go forward with other elements. Everyone we talk to, and as far as I know, everybody in this state who has done aggregation, and there are over 140 communities that have done that, they all wind up getting a better price for their electricity or gas than customers would be able to do individually. And then they add other elements to that.
What are the cons?
The cons that we have heard are concerns about designing the plan so that in fact you can guarantee that you're getting a better price. Particularly in early gas aggregation, some communities found themselves locked into a price for a period of time, and during that period, natural gas prices fell significantly. And it turned out that the aggregations customers were paying more than they could have gotten in the marketplace. And so a lot of that is addressed through how you construct the bid package and the plan to move forward. Some people have raised a concern about whether or not the opt-out provision should not be an opt-in provision. So an opt-in provision would be where the city would set the plan up and then you would reach out to everybody and say, do you want to participate in this? And opting out, some people feel perhaps limits folks' choice. But most of the people we talked to said that in terms of effectively administering the program, opt-out is much more efficient. People do have the choice, but they have to take action to get out of the program.
So there's an aggregation plan, and you can opt out of the plan
That's correct.
if it doesn't meet an individual customer's idea of
That's right.
energy costs.
That's correct. And some plans have been constructed where customers have an option during the course of the 2 or 3 year period that aggregation is set up for, that under certain identified circumstances they can opt out as well.
Cheryl?
Yes, I was going to add an additional benefit, I believe, is this opt-out process. One of the things that we know about customers is that they're not very active in shopping, and in Ohio now you have the opportunity to shop, but if you don't take advantage of it, you may not see the economic benefits that you could. Only about 20% of residential customers shop, and I would include in that small business owners, which this would cover. So this would give an opportunity for customers who might not normally go out and find the best price and the best package, including residential and small businesses, to have a default package available to them. And then, as we've discussed, there really isn't a downside to the opt-out if we, in fact, recommend, and the City Council, if you agree, that the process should include a fee-free opt-out.
So, let me ask, there are no dumb questions in this. If this does get to the voters, we'll all get these kinds of questions because I'm trying to understand it as well. So, local electric company, don't they already aggregate? Don't they already have X number of customers that they are serving, which drives down the cost of energy? And what's the difference between this aggregation and the local company?
Sure.
Aggregating the 200,000, 300,000 customers it has already?
Well, I think maybe that it's a good time to stress that the aggregation only applies to the cost of generation in the case of electricity, or the cost of the natural gas in the case of gas. It does not apply to the cost of the distribution company. So AEP Ohio or Columbia Gas of Ohio stay in place as the companies that control the poles and wires and the pipelines, if you will, that get that gas or electricity to your home or business. They're still there. Their cost is still regulated. Aggregation addresses the piece of the bill that now is unregulated in Ohio, which is the cost of generation. And even the distribution companies now, through a process set up with the Public Utilities Commission, go out into the marketplace and try to get a price. The experience with aggregation, I think it's fair to say, has been that the municipal aggregations have been able to get a better price than the standard offer which is in place. Is that fair, Cheryl?
I think it is. And Mayor, as you correctly point out, we in essence have aggregation for all AEP customers right now because AEP goes out into the market for wholesale purchase. But what we could gain as a community in Columbus is that we could customize that package to more closely meet the needs of the residential and small business customers. And by doing that, we don't lose any options. Customers can still choose to go to the default package at AEP if they decide that that's a better option for them. So we, in essence, add choice for consumers by choosing to aggregate and seek another contract option for residential and small business customers in Columbus.
I also might say from the point of view of older adults, I expect their shopping patterns are about the same as everyone else. 20% might shop and 80% don't. But I certainly have heard comments about suspicion of people marketing door-to-door and by telephone, even though they're legitimate marketing, people somewhat suspicious of that. So presented with the choice of aggregation with appropriate education, I do see older adults benefiting more since they have fixed incomes and aren't often taking advantage of the reduced prices that might be out there from choices. They would trust the city to, I think, make some choices as opposed to just marketers door-to-door.
So, generation of electricity is unregulated. It is the distribution of electricity that's regulated.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And what this does is aggregate the generation.
That's correct.
But that has no bearing on the cost of distribution.
That's correct.
None.
That could fluctuate during the time of aggregation while the generation could be a known price or a fixed price, maybe. Am I saying this right? A fixed price, and the cost of distribution could be a variable price.
Well, the cost of distribution is determined through proceedings at the Public Utilities
PUCO,
Commission. So
right.
that can move. The cost of generation, it really depends on how the city would structure its plan and put out its bid for that generation. You can do it at a fixed price for a certain period of time. Many communities do it by a comparison to some specific metric. So, for example, today the Public Utilities Commission has what they call an apples-to-apple chart. And every offer for electricity or gas is put up on their website, and people can go and you can see, well, what really is the cost that I have to compare on generation? And how does it compare to the standard offer by AEP? So some communities have said, we want to see you give us a plan that is always some percentage below the standard offer. So it can be variable as well, but that depends on how you construct the package. Some of the folks who have gone with variable plan, a fixed price plan, have tried to offset the risk of the fixed price by doing very short-term contracts. Others have gone to get the benefit of a longer-term contract, but then they've had the price compared to some metric value, so they can always know that they're below that.
So the idea here is to pick one aggregator,
Correct.
and we could construct the plan that one aggregator would be the they'd be both the distributor and the generator, is that correct?
Well, in Ohio now, those are separate by statute.
So what would we be picking, the
The
generator?
aggregator would do the generation side.
Okay,
AEP Ohio, Columbia Gas of Ohio would remain as the distributor, no matter what choice the city makes, whether we move forward or don't move forward, no matter who we chose as, in effect, the city's agent or representative to do the aggregated purchase.
In Columbus, is there more than one distributor of electricity?
Well, there's the municipal company and there's the...
Besides municipal,
And the AEP.
which is
That's it.
excluded?
That's it.
Right, okay.
One thing I wanted to add is, one of the things that I'm hearing from people that I talk to that's attractive about aggregation is the city can structure its plan to include some different things that AEP might not offer, such as a requirement for a certain percentage of energy to be purchased from renewable sources. As a matter of fact, I forget, it's Cleveland or Cincinnati, voters chose to go 100% renewable sources.
They did?
Cleveland.
Let me ask you a question about that. There's been a lot of discussion in the media about climate issues and climate control. Is there a connection here, and if so, what is it?
Well, I think the connection is that in a state like Ohio, we get 70% of our electricity from coal. Coal is the largest single source of carbon dioxide emissions that are seen as the primary contributor to negative climate change. So the question becomes, how do you move away from that dependence on coal? One way that cities have done that is to, in aggregation packages, is to ask for at least some portion, if not all of their package, to be green, to be renewable. And what they have done typically is they've put in the package that that's a preferred option, but they still need to see the cost savings. And so the experience has been they still get a cost savings by getting, in Cincinnati and Cleveland's case, both, I believe, 100% green power. Cleveland even offered people a slightly greater savings if they would take brown power, so power that included coal, and almost no one took it. They took the slightly lower savings to go with the 100% renewable package.
Were there two issues before the public in Cleveland?
No, the issue was whether or not to do aggregation. Then the plan that the city adopted gave them choices within it. So they had an opt-out program, but they added a choice. When you got your mailing about it, it said you can send back a card that says, I don't want to participate at all. You can send back a card that says, I want to participate in a higher savings, but will include coal-fired generation. Or I'll go with the city's plan that is all green.
And so in that scenario, so only one of those options were selected for all of the city.
No, they actually let their residents choose any of the three.
In the aggregation plan.
Right,
Okay.
right. So there's a lot of
That's
choice and
interesting.
flexibility. Yeah, Cheryl.
Yeah, I wanted to just add a little more information about the carbon impact. Last Monday, the US EPA issued a draft rule that would apply to the coal-fired plants in Ohio, along with all the other coal-fired plants in 48 other states. Turns out Vermont doesn't have any. But what will happen is, for the first time ever, carbon pollution will be regulated, and this regulation will apply to coal-fired plants. States will be under an obligation to develop a plan that meets our state's requirements for reducing that carbon, those carbon emissions. But the plan doesn't have to apply only to those plants. It can include 4 building blocks. One is the plant themselves. The second is having other parts of generation step up. So if we have a cleaner plant in Ohio, like a natural gas plant, they could generate more. But 3 and 4 of the building blocks are renewables and energy efficiency. And by including renewables and energy efficiency as options for compliance, it adds value to those features throughout the state. So what that means is that if Columbus chooses to aggregate and include in its package options for renewables and energy efficiency, we may find those actually have benefit. I mean, it could be monetized, and we could actually get money back as a community because we could offer it to a coal-fired power plant in some mechanism that could develop as a result of these. There have been conversations that maybe even trading credits could result as a result of this rule, which would make Columbus's investment in a sustainable energy product something that we could actually earn money on, as well as save money for our customers.
So in those instances where communities did not save money, ultimately, what happened there? Why didn't they?
My understanding is that the folks who didn't save money are people almost entirely on the gas side who got caught inside a long-term contract, long-term being 2 to 3 years, with a price established in that while the market moved significantly. And so they wound up locked into a higher price than the market was offering otherwise. What other plans have done to protect against that is they say we have to be below a metric that is established, and so we'll know we're always below that. And you can always say to folks who are in the aggregation plan, we know we're saving you X percent from the standard offer that's available. So people have tried to accommodate the fluctuation in the market by putting some variability in the price within the aggregation plan.
Mark spoke to this before, but I just want to highlight the fact that in addition to the renewable energy credits, if we can tie it with some energy efficiency programming for the homeowners, they could save further energy inside the house through some energy conservation measures that could be implemented in their homes, as well as lead to local economic development with jobs where jobs would be created to implement these efficiency measures as well. So there's a lot of significant benefits in addition to costs that could be derived from the aggregation process.
And as part of the plan, as a part of a created, crafted plan, I think we discussed the possibility of doing like 1% or smaller surcharge that would help pay for the energy efficiency programming and things like that, that could also leverage other funds to
So
help.
even with a sort of a set aside, right?
Yes.
For energy saving efforts within homes, there still can be savings to the consumer, even with the set aside
Yes.
for that purpose.
Cincinnati actually offers a good example where they set aside 1% for efficiency, 1% for renewable, and we're still able to offer a total price that was 7% below the price to compare. So it does, if you do set-asides, obviously you reduce your savings. But you can still, what cities have found is you can still find significant savings for your residents and small businesses with those add-ons.
So in your study here and your review of aggregation in the state of Ohio, for example, have you been able to, and you've mentioned a certain percent savings in some cities, have you been able to quantify that in terms of dollars?
We actually have not heard a dollar figure. I think one of the issues there is that what we found is that the percentage of savings has changed significantly over time because the market has become more competitive, which means the savings potential is less.
Yes.
And we have not heard that number. I think we could probably certainly find that from the cities we've talked to give a rounded up number of what that results in.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
Yep.
I think another important thing that for consumers, when they're being educated about this, is that even though if they vote for aggregation, if the deal isn't out there, if there's not a good deal right away, the city isn't forced to aggregate. They can wait until there is a deal that is a good deal for citizens. So people shouldn't be alarmed that, well, the prices aren't good right now, we voted for it, it has to be done. So I think that's another protection for people to understand.
And even if you move forward, if you don't get bids back that get you what you want, you don't have to accept them.
So let me ask you that question. It sounds like there's a lot of forecasting
Yes, sir.
of what energy costs might cost over a future period of time.
Yes, sir.
How am I, as a mayor, able to gauge that and to say, hey, this is going to be a good deal or it's not going to be a good deal?
Well, I think actually one of the advantages that you in particular have is that the city has a municipal electric company. And for their own customers, that's what they do on a regular basis, is do that forecasting. I think also we have that distribution company that's in place. They're still going to be there. They're still going to be providing service to the community. They also have expertise to look into the future and make predictions. But you're right, it's all based on the forecast of future energy prices.
And the design of the product. I mean, you could choose to reduce the risk of the contract by pegging it to a set price. So as prices change, we'll know that we always stand at a certain place within the market. So there's the choice of a fixed price, or there's this choice of a price that could be pegged to something that does float. And that way you always know the relationship between the price we pay and the market overall.
Okay.
I think another critical point becomes the duration of the contract. You know, is it a one-year term or a three-year term, given the volatility in the forecast? So that has to be carefully considered.
Okay.
I think one of the other issues, as your questions reflect, is that frankly, it's true of all of us that usually the most we think about electricity is when we hit the light switch and does the light come on or not. And so it really does require education of the public so that they'll understand if the city were to move forward and it went on the ballot, there'd be work involved to make sure people understood what they were voting on and how the choices impacted them in their daily lives. Anything else at this point, sir?
I'm listening.
All right. All right, so we were taking a look at aggregation. So we have a sort of a definition of what it is, and also then a section that talks a little bit about the experience that we heard from other cities. Are there things in there that you think we may have left out of the draft or need to be better highlighted? Cheryl?
There was one thing that I wanted to add that I heard during the hearings, and that was that although Cincinnati residents have smart meters, that the city of Cincinnati currently does not use that as a feature of their request for proposal, but they're seriously considering it in the future so that their customers would have options around time variable pricing. And I thought that was a very interesting thing to keep in mind and something that perhaps Columbus might want to consider going forward.
Could you say just a little bit about what smart meters are?
Sure. The distribution companies in Ohio are currently investing in meters that can actually determine how much power a resident or a small business uses at a particular period of time. And energy actually costs more depending on if a lot of people need it at the same time at the peak. And if customers can be given signals that the cost of energy is more at that point in time, they can choose not to use it at that time and save by using it at other times. That's one time variant option that can be available. And by reducing the peak overall, it's possible that the procurement for electricity by the city the cost could actually be reduced by having a more balanced load. So in essence, our distribution companies in Ohio are making these investments, and one of the ways that we can make sure all the customers get full value for this investment is making sure that when we purchase electricity, the information that's available to us as customers is taken into account.
You know, and I think that raises another issue, and as I was looking back through my notes and the summary, I don't think we heard very much about the fact that the distribution companies still play a very large role, and I would think it would be significant value for any aggregation plan to work out a clear partnership with the distribution companies. So this is a good example of smart meters are under the purview of the distribution company, not the generation side, but clearly they can work together. Many distribution companies have efficiency programs. It certainly would be foolish for the city to set up a totally new, independent, standalone efficiency program and not try to coordinate with the ones that are already out there.
And that is what we saw in Cincinnati. The information we received from the city of Cincinnati is that they package their energy efficiency program together with what was available from their utility. And the information became available at a center, so it was a one-stop shop for customers to find all the benefits that were available to them.
Right. Well, we could certainly add that as one of the issues that needed to be looked at carefully.
I have a bullet that I can just
Okay, that's
submit to you.
great. Sure. Anything else people see in those sections that we need to clarify or expand or delete? We also have a section for other possible benefits. So is there something beyond the lower price that the city can add? I think we tried to hit on the local economic development, renewables, energy efficiency. Is there anything else we need to add on that to help guide the mayor and council?
Mark, I would have some language changes only to the effect of, as I was reading through the draft, I wasn't sure it was clear that the Clean Power Plan for the carbon reduction standards applied to both renewables and energy efficiency. And I think that's a key takeaway that we want to be able to convey to the city, is that not only is energy efficiency the absolute lowest cost way for customers to meet their energy needs, but it also is a key component of this compliance pathway going forward.
I think that's a good point. You know, I think it's also true that the more the state could comply with reducing carbon emissions through renewables and efficiency, the less is the burden placed on power plants.
That's right.
And the need to either build new ones or to do very expensive upgrades to existing ones. So it may well be a way to balance off some of the potential economic impact.
Mark, another thing, I don't remember if you remember if the emphasis was on education was ongoing. I think it's also important to keep that going after aggregation, to keep it in the minds of the citizens versus this one-time push. And I don't remember any of the citizens, cities speaking to that. I don't know if they required the aggregator to do some sort of ongoing education of the community. I think that might be something we need to think about as well. So if you want to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good idea. I think that, at least what I heard, most of that seems to get done through the efficiency programs. But you're right, there's a broader issue to constantly remind people. I think it's also important that, you somehow people have to be constantly reminded that this aggregation plan is saving them something. So the degree to which you can structure even the bills to remind them of that gets them focused on the aggregation plan. We did put in a section about opt-in or opt-out. It was certainly very clearly the recommendation of people who have experience doing aggregation plans, and I think our own tendency was very clear that opt-out was the way to go. I don't know if we need to expand on that in here. We really didn't talk about negatives on the opt-in side, but we could add some of the additional challenges that opt-in presents. I think, Cheryl and Cindy have both pointed out there's a certain inertia that people have about this, because it does get complicated. It can get very confusing very quickly, and it's easier just to leave things the way they are than to try to figure out which of these 12 offers I just got in the mail is the best one. And then we had decided, and Mr. Mayor, we thought that our charge really was to make a recommendation to you and council about the value of moving forward. But we identified a number of issues that we thought needed clear due diligence as the city made a final decision. And so we have tried to address those here by just listing out things that we found or heard in the experience of other cities to be critical, and we've heard a little bit of that today. Right now, the four categories are crafting vendor eligibility. So right now, the Public Utilities Commission certifies companies to serve as that aggregator on behalf of the city. Some cities have gone beyond the minimum certification requirements and looked at other elements that they want to see, because we're not only trying to protect our price advantage, we're trying to ensure reliability, make sure we're choosing a company that's going to be there over the term of the contract and we can trust to deliver the generation under the terms we've agreed to. And so there are other factors that could be included in that. the corporate credit rating, their experience with aggregation, where are they located, what's their value to the community, if you will, and their customer service history. One of the interesting points, I think, of potential conflict is that you've done a municipal aggregation, you have somebody hired to handle any problems with the aggregation, and you also have a local distribution company, but probably what most customers are going to remember is it's the municipal aggregation program, I got a problem, I'm going to call City Hall.
That's what they do.
Yep, and so they'll do it anyway, but we'll do it anyway. We want to try to make absolutely sure that we lock into the plan very high-quality, consistent customer service through whoever is doing the work for us, so that even if they do call here first, you can give them to somebody else with assurance that their concerns will be addressed.
Seamlessness,
Yeah, seamless would be tremendous,
yeah.
absolutely.
We've had issues with that from time to time. They've gotten better.
Everybody does.
Mark, if I could,
Yeah.
there was one area that I might suggest we could also recommend taking a
Please,
look at.
please.
It wouldn't be a minimum criteria, but it might be expressed as a preferred criteria, and it might be expressed as corporate responsibility. I think that if the city points to a preferred vendor qualification of corporate responsibility, then the overall company's response as a citizen, as a corporate citizen, can be taken into account as well.
That's a good idea. The other issue, and I think we've touched on the next three actually, but one is a careful consideration to what's the length of contract. Really, in the length of contract, you're trying to balance getting a good price with risk in the marketplace. And that's something that does demand forecasting, and that is something that you really have to set up clear performance criteria and have the ability to terminate a contract, in fact, if it were to go bad. And that sort of leads to the next point, and the report draft crafts it as decision points, but another way to look at it is exit ramps for the city as it moves forward. And we think there are a number of them that protect the city and its customers. So you decide to move forward, council has to go through a process of passing a resolution. Obviously, more consideration at that point. You have to decide whether to sign the resolution. More decision at that point.
Well, if it gets to council, we will have already decided.
Okay, that's good.
Because
That's
the
excellent.
administration submits it to council.
All right, all right. But at every point then, if changes are made, the city still can say, this isn't what we wanted to see. You then go out to bid for an aggregator. Well, there's another, not only do you have the choice of picking someone who meets what you've asked for, you have the choice of saying, we don't see what we want in the packages submitted, we're not going to move forward. Or your experts that you're relying on, whether it's in the municipal electric division or working with the local distribution companies, you decide there's just too much volatility in the market at this point. It's not a good time for us to do this. So we think you can construct it in a way that you really minimize the risk to the city of being caught unaware. And then finally, it's the question of citizen involvement. It's obvious that at every stage here, a lot of public education is going to be needed. It's a very complex issue, and whether it's thinking about a ballot measure or thinking about crafting the bid package that you would put out, we're asking that you give very serious consideration to some sort of citizen advisory role to make sure that all the different perspectives of constituencies are heard before something is constructed. We just on this group, obviously, folks who are served by community action agencies, senior citizens, institutional customers, everyone has a different focus as they take a look at buying electricity or gas. And all of that has to be somehow addressed within the city planning process. And so we think that here, we've had a great experience with a pretty wide diversity of knowledge starting out the process in what aggregation was and what are the issues involved, to through questions and presentations, starting to get a firm handle on what the issues involved are.
So the plan needs to be constructed before the vote?
No. After the vote, that's correct. You can, as I understand it, you could go to the ballot with a very simple question. Do you want us to aggregate? It would be worded differently than that. You could also go with a more complicated question. I mean, you could get as detailed as you want in the question, but the more you do that, the more you limit the city's flexibility down the road to deal with a changing marketplace. So I think most...
Would you go to
Go ahead.
the public with the question of, do you want to aggregate? And if you do, these are the principles by which we will construct the plan.
Certainly could do that.
Establish, 5 or 6 principles.
Right.
That the city officials will stay within those boundaries as we construct the plan.
And that would also then give you the ability, when you were constructing the plan and the bid for an aggregator, to, in a sense, create a common language, which is to say, look, there are a lot of details and technicalities in here, but here are the 5 or 6 principles. You need to explain to us how your proposal meets those principles. And that can really help getting through the incredibly complex detail of buying electricity or gas. If you can say, okay, here are our 5 objectives, how are you helping us meet those objectives with each element of your plan?
My personal opinion is that probably on ballot language, you should include the opt-out, letting people know that they would have the ability to opt out, just to make it
As one of the principles.
as, well, the principles.
Makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
Are there
That's-
any
that's
other?
helpful.
Good. That's good to hear. Are there any other items we think we need to flag as those issues to consider? Either to add new ones or to expand on the ones that are already in the draft? I think actually dealing with the mayor's questions has been a good exercise for us to see what we missed or didn't.
Yeah, and I think we can probably expand, for instance, on the question of what exactly has to be done at what period of time, and make reference to the Ohio Revised Code, what type of plan we need to have before we go to ballot, and what we need to have afterwards. And we can have more references to the actual code provisions in whatever we report back, so that we're very clear about what the level of work needs to be done at each point in time.
Yeah. Like, how long after Cleveland, Cincinnati, before a plan was constructed and implemented? Do you know that offhand?
It varies. I think in Cleveland has had, I think of the folks we talked to, Cleveland has had the statutory authority to aggregate for longer than anybody else. They actually waited a few years to do it initially. They did it for several years, and then they basically took a 5-year break, and then they went back to it recently.
Okay.
Cincinnati has moved forward much more deliberately, I think, get it approved and then go ahead and enter into it. If I'm remembering correctly, Upper Arlington also had a delay. And it was a question of them, okay, we have the authority to do it, but we think it's too volatile right now to go in. And they're one of the communities who got caught with a gas contract where prices in the marketplace went way down during the contract. And so they've been very careful about moving into their next one.
Okay.
So my sense is, and people should say whether they got this as well, that each of the plans we heard about builds upon the experience of the past plans and the experience of other cities. And all of the changes appear to be to limit that risk, to make sure that the best value is delivered to residents and small businesses in the community. And the plans keep adding to how to do that, but they're very aware of the risks involved and how to mitigate against those.
Has there been any opposition so far to the idea of aggregation in Columbus in the website or comments by the public?
Not that we have heard. We have heard no opposition at all. I don't think we've seen any.
Council hold a public hearing? Okay. Okay. This feels and sounds very consumer-oriented. And it makes me ask the question, why is it taking us so long to consider aggregation in Columbus? I guess no one has an answer to that.
I'm not sure about that.
Well, we're doing it now. That's what matters.
Yes, sir. We are. I think to be fair, the marketplace has changed significantly over the last, well, certainly over the last decade, and even more so over the last 5 years, as both natural gas and electricity are delivered to us as customers under significantly changed rules and regulations. And so in some ways, coming in at this point allows Columbus to take advantage, as is best possible, of this new structure of how we get gas and electricity. I mean, folks who have done aggregation in the past, for example, when everything was regulated and the generation assets were still owned by the distribution company, a couple of our cities, their first time out, saw incredibly big savings compared to the cost to compare. When they went back out the second time, the companies had separated, as required by law, had gone into the competitive marketplace, and the savings possible was still there, but it was much smaller. And I'm thinking in terms of with Cincinnati, when they originally went out, they were able to achieve a savings of 21% compared to the standard offer. After everything had moved into competition, they were able to get 9%. But obviously now they have to deal with people thought, well, wait, I thought you could save me 21%. But all the rules have changed. So there's a little bit more stability, I think, on that side right now.
I can add, having been part of this process, it was very advantageous to have Cleveland, Cincinnati, Upper Arlington describe their experiences, because it did answer, I think, a lot of the basic questions on where the pitfalls might be and how to overcome them. So not being necessarily the first place to do it, I think, has its advantages in some situations.
Let others make the mistakes.
That's great. Well, let me just open it up for general comments from folks to the draft as a whole. I think we've got some some changes and additions we can make here that improve the quality. Cheryl, I think you said you had a couple of points, and I know Aparna did. You might want to raise that, Aparna, so people know the issue that you raised.
We were just trying to clarify the term renewable energy credits. As we learned through the presentations, it's a little tricky to find simple language to describe the whole notion of renewable energy credits and how they are the green attributes associated with the production of electricity rather than the electrons themselves.
So I think we can try to get an explanation in there and avoid getting totally lost in the morass of explaining it, but still get across the point. Were there other points or issues that folks had that they wanted to add, or Pastor?
Well, I was just very comforted in the fact that we did the necessary homework and research before moving forward to alleviate this conflict here in the economic public society. Because, everyone wants to know, how am I going to save money, and how am I going to avoid additional cost of my money? And so the fact that we are addressing that, and that it would be addressed very thoroughly with a constant communication piece, is very valuable.
Well, I think actually the mayor's question sort of re-emphasized what we had talked about already, which is that most of the questions we've heard about this are not for or against, they're basic information questions. You know, what is this aggregation thing? How does it work, and what benefit do I get? And that, I think, is the challenge moving forward at every stage, to make sure people begin to understand what this does and doesn't do.
Absolutely.
Well, I think if people don't have other issues to raise or questions or suggestions about the draft, if there are any changes in the wording that you would like to suggest, or an additional point you think of in the next day or so that you believe should be added, if we could get a general agreement that this draft as is now is generally accepted, but we would move forward with the understanding that we're going to do a few more edits to it, that will go back out to everybody to make sure you're comfortable with any changes from the document that's in front of you today. And then you would give your final sign-off, not in a meeting necessarily, but send back into us your approval of those changes. And we would then have the final report that we were ready to present to the mayor and to council. Obviously, we'll put a cover letter on it that quickly summarizes our recommendation, which is to move forward in the due diligence for the city. Then we would wait upon the pleasure of the mayor and the city council about whether or not they would want to sit down with us again, or if they want to just begin to move forward. And we obviously stand willing to answer any questions they have. But is that acceptable to everybody as the process moving forward? I'm seeing a lot
Yes.
of great. Charles is the only head I couldn't see. But.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay, all right.
Mark,
Jim.
I think the meat of these four recommendations in general is probably the decision points section. And that, really gets into the depth, or leaves out, makes the opportunity to get into the depth of this thing. I just wondered what sort of depth we're going to get into in our recommendations. Will we be somewhat general and then allow staff and other experts to dig in and flesh out what those decision points are exactly? Or are we going to do that ourselves?
No, I think we wanted to leave those points that needed due diligence at the general level, flag everything we thought was an important question, but the details would be worked out by staff and by council as it moves forward. So I think we just wanted to, in this particular one, say to them, look, there are a lot of decision points, and Cheryl points out it would be helpful to actually lay out in more detail the process that is before us. But to say, look, at each of these points, you get to make a decision about how you move forward from there. But we would not be trying to do that at this stage. I think that would be beyond the charge that
Okay.
the mayor and President Ginther gave us.
Thanks.
Do folks think that's right? Yeah, agree with that, yeah, okay. Well, it sounds like then we have reached the conclusion of today's session. We have a general acceptance of the draft report. We know there are going to be a few items added to it, clarifications, more detail, as has been discussed with everybody. And we will get back out to you as quickly as we can, an edited draft for your final approval, and then we'll move forward. I want to repeat what I said when the mayor was still with us. I think this was a great process to learn a lot about a very complicated issue with a diversity of knowledge sitting at the table. It meant that a lot of the right questions got asked. I think all of us have found this to be a learning experience, and I think I hope, made a valuable contribution to the city's progress moving forward on deciding about aggregation. It was, why we haven't done it before is really not a question for us to answer, as we did not, and maybe the mayor and council could discuss that among themselves if they wish, but if there's nothing else people want to raise, that would draw today's meeting to a close, and I thank everyone for the time and effort they put into this. It was an exciting and participatory process. So thank you very much, and thanks to all of you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thanks.